What is government?
The political direction and control exercised over the actions of the members, citizens, or inhabitants of communities, societies, and states. Direction of the affairs of a community. The form or system of rule by which a state, etc., is governed. The governing body of persons in a state, community, a branch or service of the supreme authority of a state or nation, taken as representing the whole. What is democracy?
Government by the people, a form of government in which the supreme power is vested in the majority and exercised directly by them or by their elected agents under a free electoral system. A state of society characterized by formal equality of rights and privileges. What is a republic?
Today, understood to be a sovereign state ruled by representatives of a widely inclusive electorate. The term republic formerly denoted a form of government that was both free from hereditary or monarchical rule and had popular control of the state and the conception of public welfare. It is in this sense that we speak of the ancient Roman Republic. Today, in addition to the above characteristics, a republic is a state in which all segments of society are enfranchised and in which the state's power is constitutionally limited. Traditionally, a republic is distinguished from a true democracy in that the republic operates through a representative assembly chosen by the citizenry, while in a democracy, the populace participates directly in governmental affairs. In actual practice, however, most modern representative governments are closer to a republic than a democracy. The United States is an example of a federal republic, in which the powers of the central government are limited and the compartment parts of the nation, the states, exercise some measure of home rule. France is an example of a centralized republic, in which the component parts have more limited powers. The USSR, though in theory a grouping of federated republics and autonomous regions, was in fact a centralized republic until its breakup in 1991. F. Herman's The Representative Republic, 1958, and Introduction to Modern Politics, 1959. The reason for government.
Our government was instituted to protect the individual unalienable rights of the people. According to our Constitution, this is a government with limited powers and is for the people and by the people, power vested in the people. That means that the government is supposed to act accordingly when the people raise their voices. The United States is supposed to be a republic. This is an excerpt from the Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of natures of God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That, whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate the governments long established should not be charged for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience have shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. America, a republic or democracy?
On February 13, 1787, in the beginnings of America as a nation, Benjamin Franklin was asked a question after leaving the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. That question was, what form of government the United States was going to have? Franklin then answered, a republic, if you can keep it. When this country was first established, it was designed to be a republic or a constitutional republic. A republic is based off of individual freedoms and the rule of law, and where the government protects individual freedoms and rights. Today, America is said to have a democracy or a federal republic. A democracy is not all it is cracked up to be. In a matter of fact, it is a known destructive device that leads to a totalitarian rule type of government. A democracy is basically a mob rule or majority rules type of government. In a democracy, you really have no rights because they can be overturned by the majority. Remember that the Messiah was sentenced and put to death even though he was declared innocent by Pilate, because it was demanded by the majority. A democracy is what got Hitler's National Socialist Party voted into office, where he then combined his power into his Nazi dictatorship. Don't be fooled by the pretty wording defining what a democracy is, because if you look closer, you'll see that it is only a trick to seize our rights, have us totally dependent on the government, and to eventually lead us to a socialist governmental rule. Famous quotes telling the truth about democracy. John Adams.
Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy that did not commit suicide. It is in vain to say that democracy is less vain, less proud, less selfish, less ambitious, or less avaricious than aristocracy or monarchy. It is not true, in fact, and nowhere appears in history. Those passions are the same in all men, under all forms of simple government, and when unchecked, produce the same effects of fraud, violence, and cruelty. Letter to John Taylor in 1814. Benjamin Franklin.
Democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. Karl Marx.
Democracy is the road to socialism. Alan Coren.
Democracy consists of choosing your dictators after they've told you what you think it is you want to hear. James Russell Lowell.
I have hinted that what people are afraid of in democracy is less the thing itself than what they conceive to be its necessary adjuncts and consequences. It is supposed to reduce all mankind to a dead level of mediocrity in character and culture, to vulgarize men's conceptions of life, and therefore their code of morals, manners, and conduct, to endanger the rights of property and possession. But I believe that the real gravamen of the charges lies in the habit it has of making itself generally disagreeable by asking the powers that be at the most inconvenient moment whether they are the powers that ought to be. If the powers that be are in a condition to give a satisfactory answer to this inevitable question, they need feel in no way discomfited by it.
There are an array of government systems that are used throughout the world. Here are a few that we should really be familiar with. The federal government.
A government with top authority segregates power between a number of smaller governments that rule in states, where different affairs are delegated to these smaller governments by the ruling central government. Monarchy.
Monarchy implies rule or the power of government in the hands of an individual who in his hereditary line becomes next in line to take over the throne. Currently there exist 31 monarchs reigning over 45 extant sovereign monarchies in the world. 16 of which are Commonwealth realms that formally recognize Queen Elizabeth II as their head of state and Prince Charles as heir. Despotism.
Despotism is the form of rule wherein a single leader rules the entire population and all his or her subjects are considered to be his or her slaves. The Pharaoh of Egypt is an example of this sort of rule. In case of the contemporary context, the term implies tyrannical rule. Dictatorship.
Dictatorship implies rule by an individual who has complete power over the country, where even a small group of people can help in ruling the government. Although there have been several definitions of dictatorship, broadly, all the various types and forms of dictatorship tend to exhibit totalitarian characteristics. When the power of the government does not come from the people, it is unlimited and tends to expand their scope of power to control every aspect of people's lives. Some countries have its own army take over the government, where there is no election process by the people, but more a forced act of rule by the dictating party. Communist government.
It is a form of government in which the state is governed by a one-party system. They work on the lines of Marxism and Leninism. Thus, the state and the Communist Party claim to act in accordance to the wishes of the working class or the peasantry. Although a communist government claims to implement democratic dictatorship of the proletariat, it tends to incline towards the abolition of the state and the implementation of communism. Theocracy.
This kind of government is when a religious hierarchy of administration is identical to that of the government, where the latter is under the religious ruling administration. It is when a religious body takes over the government, where if a church or a kind of religious group were to govern a nation, it would be termed as ecclesiocracy. They believe in being ruled by the highest authority, God, where they are believed to be functioning under his guided influence. Anarchy.
An anarchical nation is where no government rules, and there is a constant fight between groups to obtain power. There is complete disarray and chaos, where no law exists and an authority of any sort is absent. Fascism.
Rule by a leader base only. Focuses heavily on patriotism and national identity. The leaders has the power to make things illegal that do not relate to nationalism or increase belief in national pride. They believe their nation is based on commitment to an organic national community where its citizens are united together as one people through a national identity. It exalts nation and race above the individual and stands for severe economic and social regimentation and forcible suppression of opposition. Totalitarian.
Rule by a totalitarian government that regulates nearly every aspect of public and private life. Capitalism.
In a capitalist or free market economy, people own their businesses and property and must buy services for private use, such as healthcare. Socialism.
Socialist governments own many of the larger industries and provide education, health, and welfare services while allowing citizens some economic choices. Collectivism. Any philosophy or system that puts any kind of group, such as a class, nation, race, society, state, etc., before the individual. Moyer Grant. Collectivism has found varying degrees of expression in the 20th century in such movements as socialism, communism, and fascism. The least collectivism of these is social democracy, which seeks to reduce the perceived injustices of unrestrained capitalism by government regulation, redistribution of income, and varying degrees of planning and public ownership. Historically, in socialist systems, collectivism economics were carried to their furthest extreme with a minimum of private ownership and a maximum of planned economy. Encyclopedia Britannica.
The final thought. The reality of the truth is we have no real standard form of government. It was sold to the highest bidder years ago. We are just pawns in their game. The United States of America is nothing more than a corporation. Its corporate office is in Washington, District of Columbia. The president of the company is Barack Obama, and the boss on the phone is the Pope in Rome. We are soon going to be governed by the United Nations if the president continues to be allowed to implement legislation without proper checks and balances. If people don't wake up soon, see past his blackness, and pay attention to what agenda he is fulfilling, they will be sorely surprised that they have been allowing our civil liberties to be snatched from us right from under our noses. Once they took the law, the Ten Commandments, out of the judicial buildings and took prayer out of schools, it became a slow, miserable train wreck waiting to happen. The only problem is they have sped up the process.